Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another video. The first the only 4 days of FNCS are over, and I felt like I wanted to make a video on what I learned from this FNCS, whether it can be used for the future, whatever it is. I want to talk about my experiences, how the different days had different play styles, etc. So I want to start off, the first 2 days were stacked. They were a blast to play. People wanted to rotate, right? Opens was some of the most stacked games I've ever played. Semis was some of the most stacked games I've ever played on day 1 and day 2, right? And it got to the point where day 3 and day 4, I felt like I was playing a completely different game. Kids were pushing me mid-game without any tags, just to fight. And I believe the reason for that is it didn't go well for them day 1 and day 2, right? So they had a week to rethink a strategy. And from Saturday to Sunday, day 1 and day 2, by the time it came to day 3 and day 4, people thought, yo, because I'm shit at rotating or I'm shit at endgame, I need to rethink my strategy, and that's W keying. I play arena all the time. I'm the best fighter in the fucking world. And so everybody was fighting, thinking that, yo, if I fight, I'm going to be able to qualify. So people would fight, they'd get their 1, they'd get their 2 kills, and they end up dying, and they end up with like 14 to 20 points, right? Maybe even more than they had by trying to play endgame, because they suck at endgame. And it was a much more aggressive playstyle day 3 and day 4. And I realized that I had to adapt to that. I wasn't able to hit the dead side rotates anymore. I had to tank Storm for the first 12 to 15 minutes of the game. So I was tanking Storm with 3 med kits, tanking campfires, right? I had to know where campfires were around the map, and just sitting in Storm, making sure that I had I didn't even need Storm Surge because the games weren't stacked at all. There were 30-man endgames, 40-man endgames. But the problem was anytime you ran into somebody, they would rush you. Without any tags, they would grief your game. And it doesn't have to be a crazy good player to grief your game. All it has to do is somebody that wants to waste all their mats on you and sit there and pickaxe your wall, right? A bad player can still one pump you. So grief your game, grief your heals. So I realized that I had to start tanking Storm to avoid these fights. So day 1 and day 2, they were much smarter players, right? By day 3 and day 4, people had rethought out their strategies and were switching it up. The games weren't stacked anymore. It was a completely different play style. And I felt like in day 1 and day 2, I performed really well. I was on track to make heats. And by day 3 and 4, I was completely blindsided. I had no idea what I was doing. I was tilting completely because everybody wanted to push me. And also because my YouTube videos had started blowing up, right? And people thought that, yo, if we land at the same spot that he's landing at, we're going to do well. Because I was doing well in those first 2 days. If you look through my YouTube videos, the views had just gone crazy. I'd gone from averaging 17k viewers to averaging 50k, 60k views within that week. And so I started noticing my green building and Steamy Stacks, not even Steamy Stacks as a whole, my green building alone would have 7 to 10 people landing at it. A single building with 4 chests. There's 4 chests on the backside, on the container side. There were 8 people landing there. And so my drop was completely griefed. My first game of semis in day 4, I had 14 people at Steamy Stacks. My second game of semis, I had 12 people at Steamy Stacks. It was just a completely different game that I was playing, and it didn't feel fair. Listen, you guys hear me say all the time, yo, blame yourself for things, and I do. And there were things, there were fights that I fought in mid game. That's not my forte. Mid game fighting is not my forte. Avoiding people mid-game, that's my forte. That's what I'm really good at, right? There was no avoiding people. People were hunting. I was spawning into the map with shit loot because I couldn't go to my drop spot, and I'd have to swerve to a single chest out in the middle of nowhere, completely fuck up my rotates. I'd be middle map. And it was simply because of the fact that I was uploading videos and you guys were copying the drop spot. And you guys got to realize, when I upload a video and you guys copy the drop spot, that drop spot no longer becomes good, right? Because there's 10 of you every single game at that drop spot, 9 of you are going to have your games ruined. And one of them is going to come out on top with max mats, maybe no shield, whatever it is. It doesn't make sense for you guys to copy a drop spot just because somebody is doing well, right? So I learned that my YouTube influence was kind of affecting my gameplay, and that I need to stop showing my early game so that stuff doesn't happen. Granted, that wasn't the biggest mistake, right? There were things that I had to adapt to by day 3 and 4, which I said was those botates, right? I was no longer just rotating to dead side. I was completely avoiding people in game. If I saw somebody in storm, I wouldn't even look at them. I'd go the opposite way and tank even more storm, right? So that I could come into the game and just play the last 10 minutes of the game rather than playing the first 15 minutes, right? The first 15 minutes, I was simply just scavenging, maxing out my mats and storm, tanking medkits, tanking campfires. And it's key to note that when you do that, you should not be looking to fight people in storm. Nobody's going to come out on top. If you are hitting those botates, tanking storm, and you see somebody, most of the time that person who's tanking storm, there's a reason they're tanking storm. And that's not because they want to fight people. It's because they want to avoid people. So it's okay to just walk by people. It's not teaming, right? Just because you don't shoot at somebody, it's not teaming. Go your separate way. You're in storm. It doesn't make any sense. So those are the key aspects I learned from 4 days of FNCS. I didn't learn... I learned that I'm a much better coach as well than a player when it comes to solos, because I know how to rotate, where to get to, but if I get pushed by a psychopath mid-game, I get pretty nervous. I'm not confident. And when I'm coaching a tier 1 player who can absolutely shit on somebody and blend them, right? Like when I'm coaching Looter in his OCE finals, and if he ever runs into anybody, which he rarely does the way I rotate, he puts them in a blender. You know what I mean? Like these mechanical crackheads, I'm much better at coaching, and that's why my forte is in these team modes. So in day 3 and 4, there was that weakness there, right? I'm getting pushed by these people. They're hitting me for 66, thinking that they need to push, and then instantly crash pad exploit in my box, and there's just no counter there. So it felt like coaching was more fun to me over these 4 days because I got to use my brain, which is what I enjoy in Fortnite, and I didn't have to fight. I had a mechanical crackhead do that, and it's still just as rewarding. So I'd say out of the 4 days, I learned that the first 2 days, it's similar to a tournament, right? How the first 4 games out of 6 in a customs format are going to be more stacked than the last 2. And that's because people are changing up their strategies, right? The first 2 days, their strategies didn't work, so now they're coming up with a panic plan. They're starting to drop different places. They're thinking maybe their drop spot's fucked up, so they'll switch that. They're starting to push people mid-game, thinking, yo, I'm not getting any points in endgame because I'm bad at it. Let me fight people because that's what I'm good at. They think that they're better at fighting people in arena, because when they push somebody in arena, it's like you can wipe somebody instantly. But when you push somebody in FNCS, there's much more on the line. These people aren't just trying to die and get into the next game. These people are trying to stay alive. They're going to use all their mats. They're going to use all their shield, and they're going to scuff both of you. So it's nobody's fault but mine, right? There are things that obviously were out of my knowledge, as in leaking my drop spot, having people drop there, and having a crazy amount of people there every single game. And that was no exception, by the way. Day 3 and 4, every single game I went Steamy, there was an insane amount of people, and that was completely different than the week before. So I'm just gonna avoid showing my drop spot in the future. But granted, those mid-game fights, those are fights that I need to win if I want to be a top solo player. And that's why I excel better in the team modes, is because rather than having to fight people straight on, I have my 2 or 3 fraggers front lining while I'm looking for that angle, right? The part of the fight that requires flanking in a smart way where nobody can see you, waiting it out, playing the fight slow, etc. So that's what I learned from the 4 days of FNCS. It was definitely a learning experience. I didn't put in the time enough. I didn't scrim enough. I didn't do edit courses enough to stay on top. And, you know, I didn't have that expectation. I expected to qualify for heats, and I was just out of it. I placed 497th, and it was top 400 qualify for heats. And that's because day 3 and 4, I just didn't know what to do. I was a lost puppy, and it happens. Sometimes it happens, and you learn from that. I focused this season on content because I wasn't a fan of the charge. I wasn't a fan of the meta, how one item, you know, Kit's Shockwave can win you the whole game. and I grew my channel and my brand, and a lot of people started seeing the knowledge that there is in these Inside the Mind series. So I don't blame anybody. I don't regret it. You know, obviously I get depressed after tournaments when I do really bad, and it's on me. It's on me. I got drunk for tournaments. I was focused on coaching people, and I just wasn't doing that. I was focused on streaming, and I don't regret it. It was a good learning experience for those 4 days of FNCS. I will be coaching people for heats, and yeah, that's kind of just what I learned from those 4 days of FNCS. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys were able to learn something. Maybe you learned similar things. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys later.